All right, welcome back, U.S. history students. Today we are going to be looking at the New Deal, something that we've kind of briefly introduced here in class. You guys have done a short reading on a New Deal program, but what we're really talking about here is FDR's alphabet soup problems and really his response to the Great Depression and what he saw was going to be necessary for the United States to get out of the Great Depression. So you have your graphic organizers in front of you that I gave you in class, or you are doing them online through Google Slides, and I need you to fill those out as we go through this quick slide show here. So we're going to just start looking at all of these different programs that FDR created in an effort to end the Great Depression here in the United States and bring the people back onto their feet and provide people with some sort of support and kind of a way out of this terrible economic disaster. So the first thing we'll look at, and these come in order of when they were actually enacted, was the Emergency Banking Relief Act, as we acronym here with EBRA. So March 9th, 1933, we enact the Emergency Banking Relief Act, which basically just closed banks for 8 solid days. Remember, people have been running to the banks trying to get all their money out. Banks were closing left and right because they couldn't keep up with these bank runs. And FDR was like, we need to hold on for a second. We need to close all the banks. We need to make sure and assess that these banks are stable and able to open. And after those 8 days, the banks that were okay to open were allowed to reopen and assume business once again. And the rest of the banks that were deemed kind of federally unsafe by the government, they were given funds from the RFC in order to reopen and provide people with some sort of money and just getting these banks back up on their feet. So the first thing FDR does is he just closes down all the banks and is like, we need to just take a breather. We need to reassess things and make sure that all of our banks are stable, because this is kind of the basis of everybody's economic lives. And if the banks aren't stable, then nobody can feel safe about getting back to the way things were. So if we're looking at our 3 R's, relief, recovery, or reform, this is definitely a reform program. So you should definitely make note of that reform program, because we're looking at the banks here. We're kind of reforming and giving them some new rules and regulations and how they need to reopen, and providing them with a little bit of money in order to do so. I know this stuff is a little bit dry, so of course everybody needs more memes in their life, and everybody loves FDR memes. So if you are more than ready at this time, we're going to see some of the worst memes that I could find on Google Images after each one of these slides, starting with this one here and those stupid pair of sunglasses that come floating down on GIFs all over the internet. Moving right along, the Civilian Conservation Corps enacted April 5th, 1933, and this is what you guys read about in class today. It's basically providing jobs to unemployed young men and mostly uneducated young men, men who had not maybe finished high school or kept going to school because of the Great Depression, needing to work for their family. And it sent them all over the United States doing manual labor jobs on conservation products. That's what CCC stands for, Civilian Conservation Corps. Basically sending them all around to dig ditches, plant trees, build rural roads, forest fighting, a bunch of things that really were not entirely necessary for the United States, but it gave people a job, it gave them a purpose, gave them some sort of structure, a little bit of money, and the CCC, as you guys read, provided young men with food. So this program wasn't necessarily about just providing a job to men, or excuse me, it wasn't really about the job itself as it was providing the job. It wasn't like these things were absolutely critical to the United States at this time, but it was critical to get people back to work. So this is definitely a relief program because its main focus is to provide jobs. And as you'll see, some of these could fall in between. Is this a recovery? Is this a relief? But we'll make the distinction between those two. Another one of the terrible memes that I found on the internet, straight out of old deals. Moving right along, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, May of 1933. This just gave out $3.1 billion to states. in order for those states to spend it on putting people back to work. Now, the federal government could have just given people money. They could have just said, here, United States population, here's a check for this amount of money, spend it wisely. That's what they could have done with that $3.1 billion. But the federal government was like, it's more psychologically beneficial to people if we give them a job and give them a purpose, and especially give these men a purpose to get back to work, get back up on their feet, and start providing for their family again, and make money instead of just being handed a check. So the states are creating jobs, they're training people, they're giving students employment, and that's coming from the funds from the Federal Emergency Relief Administration in May 1933. And this is, again, a relief act because it is providing money to states in an effort to give people jobs. This one just terrible as well. Probably some really lame U.S. history teacher made these and thought they were great, and I can't imagine that anybody would actually think that these are relatively funny, but I promise it wasn't me who made these. So moving right along, the AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Administration, May 12th, 1933. And what this did was to really focus on farmers and trying to give them money once again that they lost as a result of the Great Depression. We know farmers are doing really well during World War I, but once the price of crops went down, they weren't making as much money and they couldn't pay back their loans. Well, the AAA tried to bail farmers out by raising their prices. And this is where the United States government really becomes involved in the agricultural industry, and it's still like this today. The government offered farmers subsidies, meaning they offered them money to either not use all of their land, to limit crop production, to kill off some of their excess livestock, basically to keep the supply lower so prices could go up. Because when you have an overabundance of supply of a product, that means demand is going to go down because there's just so much of it available, and that means the prices are going to go down. So the government was trying to help farmers get back up on their feet by trying to raise the prices of their crops. And they're actually paying farmers, which seems weird. They're paying them not to do something, to not produce something. That's what a subsidy is. And this is a way the government tries to make those prices of foods go back up to at least maybe not as high as they were during World War I, but get them to a level where farmers can start making money once again. So that's the AAA, and that is again a relief program because we're providing a service, some money to farmers themselves. Who knows, maybe he will be elected president this evening. He could be president right now as you are watching this video. Moving right along, the TVA, called the Tennessee Valley Authority, which happens in late May of 1933. And it's really focusing in on an area in the state of Tennessee around the Tennessee River Valley, which is why it's called the Tennessee Valley Authority. And this whole program was centered around building hydroelectric dams, providing electricity, providing different pieces of infrastructure to help these poor rural Americans who had really been hit hard by the Great Depression. Now, all of this, yes, is providing jobs. People are working to bring electricity to places, which is a great thing. We know electricity is in the cities, but why not bring it to the people in the countryside? We know that dams and other pieces of infrastructure are good for areas. So we're bringing all this in, and that is a way to provide people with jobs because people have to build it. But this is a recovery policy because it's really focusing in on building things for people, building up our infrastructure, bringing them electricity, helping them recover from the effects of the Great Depression and really move on from it. So the TVA is just this big program that is bringing modern technology to poor people in rural country areas in Tennessee. That's the TVA, a recovery program. I don't even have anything to say about that one. Just bad. The PWA, Public Works Administration of June 1933, created jobs by giving contracts to construction companies. So basically the government was like, here, construction companies in all of these states, we are going to contract your company to build things, and you're going to need workers to do that, so now you can hire people. So the government's spending $3.3 billion in 1933 alone to build roads, schools, hospitals, dams, bridges. If you've ever been through the Lincoln Tunnel in New York, been on the bridge to Key West, or flown into the Dane County Airport, those are all Public Works Administration projects. So it's building up infrastructure all over the country, but it's really focused in on giving people jobs. It's paying construction companies, saying, hey, build this bridge, and now you're going to need to hire a lot of people to do it. And since we're going to pay you, your company, the money to do this job, you can pay new employees. That is a relief program. It's trying to give people jobs. Yes, it is kind of, in an essence, recovery because we're building up infrastructure, but its focus, first and foremost, is providing jobs to Americans. That's why $3.3 billion is spent, given to construction companies to hire new employees. My favorite GIF in the world, really focusing in here how FDR is departing from that conservative era of politics and moving into a new liberal area where the government is dominating over the economy. The FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, June 16th, 1933. This was really trying to get people on board with the banks again. Now, if you listen to a banking commercial today, they'll say a whole bunch of things really fast at the end, and one of them they'll say is FDIC insured. The government knew that people weren't trusting banks, in part due to bank runs. So what this did was it insured everybody's money. If you put money into the bank up to $5,000 in a savings account, the government said even if the banks closed, that the government will guarantee you'll get that money back, no matter what happens. It's basically telling people there's no way you can lose your money by putting it into a bank, up to a certain amount. Now, if you're smart and you have more than $5,000, as soon as you hit that limit, you just open another account, fill that up until you hit 5,000, and then open another one. So in case the bank were to go under, the government will guarantee that you will be paid back that $5,000. Today, it's $250,000. So $250,000 in an account is FDIC insured, meaning the government guarantees if anything happens to that bank, you will get at your $250,000 back. If you have $1 million in your bank account and the bank closes, you're only going to get $250,000 of that back. So it makes sense to open up several accounts. So that's FDIC. It's something that is still around today, a very essential portion of banking. And that is reform. It's reforming the banking system, how banks work. So FDR, while he's seen as this great hero by some, by others, he's seen as one of the worst presidents of all time by conservatives who think that he overstepped his boundaries as president and expanded the boundaries of the government way into our economic lives. Really, over the next 2 days, we're going to be evaluating how well these programs worked and really the differences between FDR's and Hoover's. So make sure you bring those sheets back to class tomorrow.